Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone who is joining from different parts of the world today and watching this recording in the future. My name is Akshay Ragmi, and it is a pleasure to welcome everyone to this webinar. I am the Business Engagement Manager at Climate Catalyst. Climate Catalyst is a new NGO that works to tackle complex climate issues with bringing together different stakeholders, including businesses and investors, civil society, academia, policymakers. So this is a first event in a series of many other activities that we are organizing for different stakeholders. This is the first introduction to peatlands. For some of you, this is a very new topic. Others have a more deeper knowledge. Our objective here today is for you to walk away with an understanding of the role that businesses can play in peatlands restoration, in achieving the ambitions of the Paris Agreement, and for you to really walk away with concrete actions that you can take in various avenues to support the restoration of European peatlands. We are going to be asking you at the end what topics that are introduced here today that you would learn, you would like to learn more about. In our agenda, we have three presenters, three experts who will be speaking on the different aspects of businesses as related to restoring peatlands. We will have some time for questions at the end. So please send in your questions throughout the webinar through the Q&A function, and we will pose them to our presenters during the question and answer session at the end. A request, please do not do so anonymously. We would like to know where these questions are coming from. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Jan Peters. Jan acts as the managing director at the Michael Saccow Foundation. He's a partner in the Greifswald-Meyer Center. His work focuses on peatlands and climate change with main expertise on policy analysis and advocacy, peatland management strategies, and stakeholder dialogue processes. He holds rich experiences in international projects on climate change mitigation and adaptation, biodiversity conservation, and development cooperation in Europe, and Germany and the Baltic states, Asia, Africa, and South America. Additionally, he is vice chair of the board of Wetlands International, European Association. Over to you, Jan.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Akshay, for this warm introduction. And I have the pleasure today to introduce you into the peatland issue, the peatland topic, and tell you why peatlands matter for conservation, restoration, and sustainable use for climate, biodiversity, and livelihoods. So next slide. What are peatlands and why are they important? The most important component of peatlands are, of course, peat. Peat, that's an organic layer of organic matter. We call a peatland when it reaches at least 30 centimeter of peat layer on the surface, and it is formed in situ of died-off biomass, mostly from the underground biomass, so from the roots or from mosses which grow on the peatland. And a peatland is living, functional if it has permanent water saturation, and it stays wet permanently throughout the year, which leads to the fact that the growth of organic matter is bigger than the decay, and peat can be formed. Under the UNFCCC terminology, peat soils and peatlands are considered as organic soils and could be found in the land use change and forestry section. Next one. But if peatlands are not wet anymore because they are drained by human influence, this drainage leads to the decomposition of peat layers and the release of greenhouse gas emissions. This is a picture which is typically found in Lithuania, but also in other European member states, deep drainage channels and also pumping stations which drain the land, and huge amounts of carbon dioxide, CO2, nitrous oxide from the fertilization of these lands, but also methane emissions from the drainage channels and pools are emitted to the atmosphere. Next. And the process behind that is very simple, as peat is like gherkins. When you remove the conserving, mostly acid water, the organic matter rots away and oxidizes and goes up to the air. And here we supply chains and businesses, companies come into play, because most of the peatland degradation, most of the drainage is happening due to land use and agricultural management. For example, cattle on drained peat grasslands emit almost 30 tons CO2 equivalent per hectare and year after IPCC methodologies. And if you calculate or if you transfer that into the products which are produced from these soils, this leads to a footprint of, for example, 1 kg of cheese, which holds then 55 kg of CO2 from these sites, or 1 liter of milk is equal to burning 2.4 liters of petrol, which is 5 times higher than the emissions if the milk is produced from grasslands on mineral soils. Another example is cropland farming, for example, here potatoes, but also maize or carrots, other vegetables can be grown on peat soils. Here a picture from the vast peatlands of Ukraine. And croplands, as the soil is after drainage turned around several times a year, or at least every year, the emissions are even higher, 37 tons CO2 equivalent per hectare and year. And in some countries, like you can see here a picture from Germany, these potatoes are even promoted by grown on the peatland, as they should have better quality, but actually they also have much higher carbon footprint than products from mineral soils. Next one. And this land use is actually happening in most of the European member states. So here you can see a graph which we just produced for a policy brief, which will be published in a few days. You can see here the different member states, and in yellow you see the percentage of the peatlands which are drained for agriculture. So mostly in Central Europe, like in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Poland, but also in Denmark or Ireland. But also, for example, in Romania, most of the peatlands are actually drained for agriculture, and all companies should have a look in their value chain, in their supply chains, if products are produced on peat soils, on drained peat soils, which will then have a big effect on their companies' greenhouse gas emissions. In the northern states, like Sweden, Finland, but also the Baltic countries, forestry on drained peat soils also has a huge effect on peatlands, on drained peatlands. Also here, the long-term emissions from the peat soils, from the drained peat soils, are higher than the carbon which is sequestered by the growing trees on these sites. So also here, quite a responsibility for all companies which are using wood to check whether the timber is produced on drained peat soils or not, as this has quite a big influence on the footprint of these timber products. Next one. And peatlands could not only be found in Europe, but they are found worldwide. in almost every country. You see here a recent map we produced for the global peatland assessment, which is supposed to be published in a few weeks on the COP27 in Egypt. And you can see that worldwide 4 million square kilometers are covered with peat in the boreal zone, in the temperate zone, but also in the tropics, like in South America, in the Congo Basin, in Central Africa, and in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, Indonesia, other countries there. So almost every country in the world has a responsibility for peatlands, and they could be found almost everywhere. And most of these peatlands are worldwide, are still undrained, but unfortunately Europe is one of the leaders in peatland degradation. So here the picture is different. Next one. Here you see the map for Europe. The darker the red on the main graph is, the higher the rate or the percentage of drained and degraded peatland area of the total peatland area is. And you see that, for example, countries like Germany, like the Netherlands, but also Poland, Ireland, have quite high percentage of degraded peatlands. In Europe, in total, 25% are degraded, but this is Europe in total, so including also European part of Russia, for example. And in the EU, even 50% of all peatlands are degraded, and which leads to the fact that there are also greenhouse gas emitters, but it also has, of course, an effect on the habitat loss, for biodiversity, on issues for water supply, for water quality in these areas, which is very important also for climate change adaptation. And so we welcome very much that the European Commission in June issued the proposal for a nature restoration law, which is actually setting ambitious targets for restoring peatlands. And what we have seen in the beginning, peatlands can only survive, peatlands can be only restored if the water level is high throughout the year. Only then we can preserve the peat body and keep the organic matter in the ground and not let it emit as CO2 to the atmosphere. And the huge effect of relatively small land in the EU and in several EU member states, you see here on these cycles in the left part of the graph of the slide. The inner circle is the percentage of land which is covered by peatlands. So in the EU, it's only 3% of the land. And the outer ring shows the emissions from these lands in the agriculture and land use sector. So for the EU, on only 3% of the land, 25% of total greenhouse gas emissions are emitted from peat soils. So disproportional high source of emissions. And you can see here on these other circles for different countries that in, for example, the Baltics, in Finland, in Scandinavia, but also in Germany, these numbers are even higher. And this leads also to the fact that the EU is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases from peatlands, roughly 207 megatons of CO2 equivalent per year, just after Indonesia, which is the top emitting country. And in total of the total emissions from the EU, 5% comes from peatlands. So there is a high emission reduction potential in many European member states. And on the right side, you can see the major countries, which is, for example, Germany, which is the top emitter in Europe, but also Ireland, Poland, Baltic states, Finland, and others. Next one. So we need to reduce this, and this leads to the fact that we have to re-wet at least 500 hectares annually in the EU, according to the transformation pathway, which we made up for Germany, which you can see here. moving from grassland and cropland and rainforest management to wetland use. Next one. So this needs a paradigm shift in peatland management from these drain polders to rewetted lands. Next one. And we need for this, of course, alternative income options, which need to be developed, like paludiculture, wetland crops, and innovative value chain, which has to be innovated also by businesses, by the private sector, rewarding emission reductions, for example, by public payments and appropriate crediting schemes, which we also call carbon farming for the farmers, and adjustments of the current agricultural policy framework. Next. So possible products are construction, insulation materials, fibers for paper and moldings, packaging, potting soils and substrates, replacing fossil peat, bioenergy, and biorefinery. And we can actually source high quality and carbon sink products, which have a threefold negative carbon footprint from these insulation materials. They reduce reduction of soil emissions. They lead to carbon storage in long life products made from the biomass and replacing fossil resources and energy intensive products. So which is not even including the potential new peat forming and carbon sequestration. Next one. But at the moment, these paludiculture sites, one you see here from northeastern Germany, are wet islands and drained landscapes, which of course makes it very difficult and costly. And this needs to be changed. So we need a transformative change in peatland management throughout Europe and also worldwide. And the private sectors as pioneer and innovator plays a huge role, and every business should check whether they have peatland commodities like agriculture products, forestry products, but also banks with their loans, insurance with insurance products, their value chains, and support restoration and rewetting of peatlands throughout the landscape. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jan, for a great presentation. I would like to invite our next presenter, Paul Ledbetter, from the Areas of Natural Beauty North Pennies partnership program, who will speak about the various opportunities to business and private finance. Paul is the Peatland Program Manager at the North Pennies Area of Outstanding Beauty Partnership. He holds a Master of Science degree in forestry from Lakehead University in Northwestern Ontario, Canada, and undergraduate degrees in geography and environmental science from Nipissing University in Ontario, Canada. Paul has been working in the nature conservation and protected areas world for 25 years and has a keen interest in wetland ecosystems. As program manager in the North Pennies over the past 16 years, Paul has led a team of peatland specialists to raise 25 million pounds to restore over 45,000 hectares of degraded peatlands in England's largest blanket bog system. Paul has extensive experience in project development, nature financing for conservation work, and delivering results on the ground and using practical experience to support policy development. Thank you, Paul, for your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so my name is Paul Ledbetter. I work in the North Pennines AO&B partnership, which is based in Northeast England. I'm going to run through what our organization does and then touch on the Great North Bog, which is a coalition of peatland programs in England. Next slide, please. Okay, why are peatlands important? I'm going to whiz through this because it's been touched on before, but it's something we need to know. So go ahead. It's biodiversity. The blanket bog that we are looking at is a unique habitat. It's only found in very small quantity worldwide. So it's an internationally important and protected habitat. Thank you. Carbon store. Peatlands are the largest terrestrial-based carbon store on the planet. 5% there, Jan's confirmed that number. 5% of global and UK emissions come from damaged peat, whereas the aviation fleet of the UK is about 2 to 3%. So you want something to do that gives us time to think about other things like inventing electric airplanes. Peatland restoration is an easy one. Next, please. Water supply. Up in my patch, there are 3 rivers, the Tyne, the Tees, and the Wear. They are drinking water supply for about several million people. So it's an important water supply for people as well. Okay. Flooding. Peatlands that are intact have a benefit on downstream flooding. They reduce downstream flooding and the flashiness after heavy rain. So they act like a sponge. They can act like a sponge. Okay. Watercolors is one you might not think about. While this isn't water, you can see that's clear. The water in the streams around here is whiskey colored. And it's not whiskey, despite where we live. It's stained with dissolved organic carbon, and that costs a lot of money to remove at the treatment plants. So if you have healthy peatlands, you can reduce the watercolor and thus reduce treatment costs. Okay. Sediment loading, larger chunks of peat fall into rivers and they end up blocking up habitats for fish and what have you, and then have to be removed in harbors. So keep the peat on the mountains, basically. Okay. Historical record, again, one that many people don't think about, and that is the fact that peatlands in this part of the world started forming about 8,000 years ago after the last glaciation. And as they've accumulated, that nice slide that Jan had, they store remnants of things past. So whether it's pollen particles or wood or people or whatever it is, there's a record of the past in peat. You keep it wet, you keep the historical record intact. Another one, the economy. Many people make their living in peatlands, off of peatlands, doing various things all over the world, but it's very important for economic. In my neck of the woods, it's grouse shooting is a big economy up here, as is tourism. So there's an economic benefit of just the intrinsic existence of peatlands, I suppose. And then finally, the one that we often forget about, these are my kids. They're teenagers now, but about future generations, I just want to remind everybody, I'm very keen on this one because I used to be that generation. Now we're the ones in control here. So making sure we have something to pass on to the children. So where am I? North Pennines AONB. If you hit the next, you'll see an arrow pop up. That's where we are. That's in Northern England. We cover parts of Cumbria, Northumberland, County Durham, and a bit of North Yorkshire. 2,000 square kilometers of upland, and it's quite a remote area of England. And AONB is a bit like a national park. Thank you. Okay, so let's go through some of this. This is a picture of a typical blanket bog up here, which are essentially mountain bogs exclusively fed by rain. So it's quite wet in this part of the world, okay? So the AONB peatland body looks a bit like this. That's the boundary of it. The blue bit is the actual peat body, okay? There's quite a few here, so you can just click through these. 1,000 square kilometers of peat. We've got 30% of England's blanket bog. It's the largest intact bog in England. It's also the most drained, and it's also the most damaged in area in terms of eroding peat, okay? So this is an image of a survey we did using air photos showing the drains that were cut into the peat since World War II. So there are 10,000 kilometers of these, okay? And again, that's what we used to do. That's how we treated our peatlands after World War II. We cut them at industrial scale to dry them to make them quote unquote more productive, left off to the legacy of damaged peat and climate change gases being emitted from the peat, okay? This is another image of the assessment we did of our peatlands where we looked at the bare peat areas. So when you cut and dry, this is the result. You have masses, we have thousands of sites that are damaged where all the vegetation is gone. And this is what we're working on right now, restoring this, okay? So 4,000 bare peat areas look a bit like this, and we have 20 years worth of work to do. We've been working for 16 years, another 20 years to go, okay? So the program I run has 4 main objectives. Restoration. If we're not doing restoration, we're talking about restoration, actually doing it. It's the most important thing we do. We support research, make sure we can understand more about peatlands, the best techniques, the role of peatlands in climate change, et cetera, Then celebrating peatlands. Peatlands know more about most other ecosystems than peatlands. As you can tell, my accent, I'm not from Northeast England. A lot of people in this area don't know that that blanket bog they live next door to is a blanket bog and why it's important. So the idea of raising the awareness of peatlands, they're considered, the best term I've heard is an uncharismatic ecosystem, but they are very important in terms of global climate change. And then provision of best advice. People working and doing things on peatlands need to know why they can and can't do things. So the problem is, over the past 200 years, and especially since World War II, we've had decades of drainage. There's been 200 years of pollution in certain parts of the UK, in the Peak District in the south, where you had all the old cotton mills and what have you. And then inappropriate management, meaning very intensive management, which has damaged the peatlands. It leads to massive losses of carbon, reduce sequestration of carbon out of the atmosphere, and you get increases of flood risk, sedimentation, water color, and ultimately loss of biodiversity, and also for farmers up here, grazing land. That picture to the left there is a complex, a damaged peat complex, where you can see all the bare stuff to the left. It's no good for anything, just washing away and oxidizing, okay? So the solution, I could spend an hour on this, but we have a 5-step solution here. If you solve the hydrology issues, where you can see all these, this image here to the left has dams of different types, stone dams, coir roll dams, wooden dams in certain cases. You slow the flow, you stop the erosive power of the water, and that's the main thing you do. Then you have to go and reprofile the slopes, which are very steep, into a lesser slope like that, so things can grow back on them. You then cut brash, which has sphagnum in it, from a healthy donor site, let's say, and move it and spread it over there. You then revegetate by planting cotton grasses and things like that. And ultimately, one of the most important things is the final thing we do is to plant sphagnum. And sphagnum is key because sphagnum is what controls the water table, which Jan had mentioned about that. You need to have the water table close to the top for a healthy peatland. Okay, so what we do is we turn something like this is one of our sites in Cumbria, turn it from this, and then we apply our treatment. 2 years later, you get, the next slide, that. So we do this at a very large scale, and we've been doing this for 16 years. We've restored probably the better part of 100 sites, I think, since I started this job. Okay, next slide. So here's a bit of what we've done. Is North Pennines, and just whip through these. That's how much we've stored over 16 years, 450 square kilometers, the money we've raised. We restore about 2,000 hectares a year. It's getting more. We're able to use the UK Peatland Code to develop carbon credits, so we can actually sell carbon credits based on our peatland work through a very robust system. The program we currently have is a European project called Pennine Peat Life, okay? Another one called Carbon Connects. We have income or money streams coming from DEFRA, which is the UK government, for those who don't know the UK. We have a large scale kind of heritage lottery fund project called T-Swale, which is about massive ecosystems and connecting them and making them more connected, okay? And then we have countryside stewardship, which is about the money that we can access through agri-environment schemes to help pay for restoration work, UK government again. And then Nature for Climate is the new, now we're not in the EU, the new fund that we can tap into in the UK, which has replaced LIFE and Interreg. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the Great North Bog, which is a coalition of us, North Pennines, of 5 other partners. Okay. So the Great North Bog is a coalition initiated by North Pennines, Yorkshire Peat Partnership, and Moors for the Future, and also further developed with Cumbria Peat Partnership, Northumberland Peat Partnership, and Lancashire. The only thing we've done differently here is we've decided to work together, loosely together under a coalition. We're not a new organization, we're not new anything. We're just working together in a joined up fashion to show the scale. So that's 7,000 kilometers of upland peat in England. So all the way from the Peak District, which touches almost the West Midlands, all the way to the Scottish border, to the lakes, and to the North York Moors. So the protected area family there of national parks and AONBs. And it's just a new way of thinking, really. So we have funding from a foundation in the UK to help pay for some of the staffing on this, but it's just a new way of doing business, really, thinking more joined up. Okay. So a bit about the Great North Bog. As a whole, we've restored over 1,400 square kilometers of upland peat. 20 years in the making. I've been here 16 years. One of the partners has been around for the better part of 20. We've got 50 years of collective experience, so we know what we're doing when it comes to peat and restoration. Okay. We have raised anywhere from 75, I'm here up to 100 million pounds over the past 20 years through numerous sources. As you'd expect, a program manager, I spend a lot of my time trying to figure out what's next, how to keep all this moving, because we've got 20 years worth of work to do. We also, interestingly, we spend most of that money in local economy, so very, very rural area up here. So there's a new green industry called peatland restoration in the Great North Bog. I say new, the past dozen years or so, that pays people quite well to do this kind of work. So there's a new opportunity here as well. Okay. And we work from the local to global level. So I'm quite proud of the fact that we can go and talk to a student at the local school here and also talk to United Nations Environment Program, GPI, something like Diana Kapansky. So that span of the local to the international, which I think is very important. Okay. And then just peatlands of the UK's rainforests. Just leave it at that. So if the take-home message there, that's kind of how we see this. It's a very important ecosystem. Okay. And finally, why should businesses private support peatland restoration? And this is the things I've thought about. One is the climate change crisis. You might consider supporting this. Okay. Biodiversity crisis. These are massive things that are impacting us. You are able to do it. You have the big companies of the world are able to do this kind of thing. You have the financing to do this. So we're asking you to help us. It's the right thing to do, quote unquote. I'm not going to be ashamed about that. It is the right thing to do for all sorts of reasons. We also have CSR and ESG targets that you may have and you might want to focus on. So that's another thing that you can, why you want to do it. And carbon credits, we're able to provide carbon credits if that is what you want. Okay. And in my view, demonstrate the power of the private sector. We hear all this talk of the private sector can help with this, and the private sector has trillions of dollars and pounds. The governments of the world have billions. So, that's an interesting idea. And I think final one is it's time to scale this up. Just keep going through these. Develop this green industry, develop the private sector financing, minimize red tape, lots of fuss about things, fiscal cliffs, money disappears at the end of the year, connect at the global level, which we do, and keep going, really. We've got something moving here. We know what we're doing. We have a good partnership, and we're now trying to collaborate internationally. Okay. That's my presentation. Sorry, I had to whiz through it so quickly. Hopefully you got the gist of that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you very much for that call to action for businesses and investors. I would like to introduce our third presenter. Claudia Buehler from the Michael Otto Environmental Foundation. She was born in Stuttgart in southern Germany and grew up in Bavaria. She studied agricultural marketing and agricultural management in Weihenstephan in Bavaria. Her university degree is in industrial engineering. She has worked for some time in South Africa as a distribution consultant for agricultural products and has worked several years in marketing and business consultancies. Since 2002 in several international management positions in the Otto Group, in sales, marketing, and strategic development responsibilities. The key element in all of these roles was stakeholder management and being a bridge builder between parties with demanding and contrary positions. The key focus is on building up new business models as well as on transformation of the organization's technical infrastructures and processes. Since September 2022, Claudia directs and manages the Environmental Foundation Michael Otto. Thank you so much, Claudia. Over to you.
Thanks, actually. Yes, hello. I'm happy to be here this afternoon. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everybody here in the crowd. I would like to show you, after we heard a lot of the damage which drained peatlands cause and all the negative effects, I would like to give a kind of look forward, how we can perhaps solve all these problems. As Paul said, it's the right thing to do, and it's definitely the right thing to do. And we founded an initiative, which I would like to present to you today, and also what we try to achieve, what our targets and our goals are. This is what I would like to show you today. Yes, thank you. If we look at the initial situation, we have the fact that a farmer earns about 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 euro per hectare per year. And this is his income, this is his living. And he earns this money when he uses his areas for grassland and cropland. also on drained moors, on drained peatlands. And if we want them now to re-wet their areas, they will lose their previous incomes. They will lose their foundation, their original business. And we should have a good answer to this question: how should I earn my money in the future? And at least with a focus on giving them an option to earn at least similar amounts, or slightly lower amounts, or even better, a better earning. And what do we have to do to give them a good answer how to earn their money? We have to develop economically concepts, economically useful concepts, and also the economical framework, condition framework, in close conjunction with an appropriate legal funding. And this all has to go together. And because these are so many things we have to look at. It's the economy, it's politics, it's science, and so many things to do all at once to build up an option so that farmers can get a substitute for the cropland, grassland on drained peatlands. We founded in mid of 2021 an initiative. This initiative is called Tomorrow, and it was founded by the Michael Suckow Foundation. You got to know Jan Peters before, and also the Michael Otto Environmental Foundation. And these two foundations got together to work together with all the knowledge they bring in to make this big target, this big vision, to make it happen. I would like to present this initiative to you. Tomorrow will specifically dovetail all the knowledge from the Michael Otto Environmental Foundation, as well as the Michael Suckow Foundation, as a partner of the Greifswald-Meyer Center. And we aim to raise peatland climate and nature conservation to a new level of implementation speed, and also, and this is crucial, social support. And what we want to do with it is to invent sustainable use of peatland products in Germany and also the European Union. The cooperation partners, I just mentioned them, the two foundations. And the thing which is going with the Michael Otto Foundation is we have very, very close ties to the Otto Group from an economical view. The Otto Group, among other companies, brings us a huge benefit. With the Otto Group, and the Otto Group has about 120 single companies, we can put them live practical tests. We can practical test, invent with possibility, with model character, how paludiculture becomes economically feasible. And the Michael Suckow Foundation brings in more the scientific part to this cooperation, also with the Greifswald-Meyer Center. This initiative is planned for now 5 years, but perhaps it will get prolonged. And the key objectives of this initiative is we want to demonstrate the potential for climate protection and biodiversity through the re-wetting of peatlands. This one is the first one. The second one is that we want to motivate and also inspire companies in Germany who have a sustainability focus to use potential products of re-wetted peatlands. Also, potential products can be like climate certificates, also products from recovering biodiversity, and also, and this is at the moment the key focus, innovative products from sustainable peatland use in the context of paludiculture. And what we also try to realize in this initiative is that we want to improve the climate and landscape policies of the federal government and the European Union, which will be necessary for the activation of the potential of paludiculture. The Tomorrow Initiative focuses on 4 core activities. The left ones in gray, I do not mention at the moment. They are all 4 are equally important, but I will focus now on the 2 core activities on the right-hand side. It's first the economy. We want to build a demand alliance. We want to activate businesses, companies, to use wet peatland products through building up the value creation from paludiculture and the use of carbon credits. This is the economical part, and we have 2 incubators, two companies who also help us to realize it. On the first side, it's the Otto Group and Sustain Consulting. Otto Group, I just mentioned, and Sustain Consulting is a management consultancy, also part of the Otto Group. And this consultancy is specialized in sustainability, and they will support us in implementing the goals. What is the basic situation now if we want to build up the new value chain that potential peatland products or paludiculture products from rewetted peatlands get into the value chain? We do have the situation that for many or for most of the peatland for the paludiculture products, not yet value chains exist. And this is a classic chicken and egg situation. On the one hand, we have the companies. If we want them to use the paludiculture products, they need sufficient and predictable raw materials. Only then they will be willing to invest in new production methods and new tests, and also to issue acceptance guarantees. On the other hand, we have the farmers from the supply side, and they have to expect yield risks. They have to be, they need their income, and they have to expect yield risks when they completely transform their soil management to a paludiculture, as they don't have the acceptance guarantees, the purchase guarantees yet. And that's why they are not, it's hard to convince them to change their business model. And if we look now at the key challenges only on the economical side, the companies, what are the key challenges for business partners when we address them and we want to motivate, to inspire them to go this path with us? And we say, let's do a test project, a model project with us. We need to try and to find out which real potential is in these paludiculture products. We have in the companies, we have limited capacities and resources, and it's always the bottleneck in the operational businesses. And at the moment, specifically at the moment, we have a very, very challenging market and economical situation due to external crises like the Ukraine or Corona, and this causes a very heavy market development. And if we now want to do test methods, test pilot projects with them, it's additional investing time and money in these projects, and this really requires additional commitment from the companies. And when we convince them to do this test or model or pilot project with us, it's not only them we have to convince, we also have to convince the indirect partners from the companies, like the suppliers or contractual partners. Therefore, we also have to give even more strength into this. And we also have to face the fact that scalability, even if the tests were positive, scalability cannot be guaranteed. We still have the risks, even if they can work with a paludiculture product, that there will not be a go live. But we are all optimists and we are all positive, and we look on the opportunities side of a pilot project, and the clear advantages and the clear opportunities with doing a pilot project with paludiculture products is that the companies can strengthen their sustainability positioning and take this in their marketing activities and communicate that clearly to their customers. The companies take over the first mover role with pilot project and can use this as well in their marketing activities and can gain significant competitive advantages over the other market players. And they also, if they take part and if they are successful with all the new processing models, they can secure their sources of raw materials. At the moment, you know, we are very short of timber, we are short of paper, and if paludiculture is successful, they can substitute all these bottleneck materials with paludiculture. And then they will be able to further supply the customers. And companies also gain direct advantages when they take part in the pilot projects in achieving climate neutrality with the climate certificates, of course, through their commitment. So this was a snapshot, just a snapshot into the economical side, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for the amazing opportunities that lie ahead in using Peatlands products. Now I would like to hand it over to Emily, who's our Director of Business and Investor Engagement, to speak more about the concrete activities that have been mentioned in the presentations before. Over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Akshay. Sorry for causing feedback there. We're sitting right next to each other. So I'm not going to talk very long because I want to get into the Q&A. But thank you to our previous three speakers who really summarized the range of actions that business can take. And it's really exciting that we've had about 80 participants on this webinar. So that's a huge kind of signal of interest from the business community about how to get involved. So on this slide here is a kind of a summary of the ways that you can take action, and there are others, and also a kind of summary of where Climate Catalyst would like to help businesses take action. So we're interested to hear from you, and we've got a little poll coming up of where you're interested to engage, and then we will design activities, further webinars, for deep dives, briefings, events around these things so that you can get the information you need to take action. So very simply, and this has come up, the first thing that we need to do is really do no harm. We need to stop degrading peatland. And as Paul said, we need to start really thinking about this uncharismatic ecosystem in the same way that companies on this webinar will have been for years thinking about deforestation of tropical rainforests or acidification of oceans. We need to make peatland kind of front and center And then we need to understand where it is in our operations and supply chains. And there are ways to do that. And through the global peatlands assessment that Jan referenced, which will be launched at COP27. And there are technologies that help businesses do that. But also businesses like Otto Group, Claudia just mentioned, very quickly realized where they were degrading peatland and got started on action. So we can really start today to identify that in our supply chains and operations. We then, of course, need to disclose because what we measure matters. And we know that when we start disclosing and setting targets, that's when action takes place. And many of you will be aware that the SBTi just last week or the week before launched their new FLAG methodology. So that's the methodology that businesses can use to set science-based targets for their land use emissions. So that's coming online now. And also there's a consultation around the GHG protocol about how businesses start to identify and measure emissions in land use. So those are two important processes, and we as Climate Catalyst are very happy to be a conduit between business and those processes so that you really properly understand how that will help you disclose and then set targets for your degraded peatlands emissions. Thirdly, and I think it's come up in the questions, businesses not only need to take action themselves, but need to advocate. One very significant piece of policy in the EU, although there are other policy opportunities in other geographies, is the EU restoration law. And again, us as Climate Catalyst are very interested in arranging advocacy activities, designing business positions, and bringing business together with MEPs and member states to talk about the necessity of strong peatland degradation or restoration targets rather, as well as restoration opportunities for various ecosystems. And then there's really, the action that you take place, that you can take, becoming a pioneer and champion in a range of ways. And we've just heard from Otto Group, the innovation they've put in place in terms of polluter culture, but there are other revenue and revenue raising opportunities in restoring peatland, including other ecosystem services such as water management and even tourism. So there's a ways that you as businesses operating on degraded peatland can seek to restore that and to use those lands for better purposes. And finally, as Paul mentioned, we know that we have the opportunity, we have the solution to stop peatland being degraded, and it's a no-brainer. So we need to be investing in peatland restoration, and we need to do that in a credible way, as I think also has come up in the chat. So with 5 minutes ago, I'm going to hand it back over to Akshay, who's going to direct some of your questions to our speakers. And I hope you can maybe stay a few more minutes late to hear that.
Thank you, Emily. I will also, Emily just mentioned these 5 avenues of action. I'm going to send a poll on that you can essentially participate in this poll to let us know what action you would be more interested in, to learn more about, to actually take action in. So throughout the Q&A, the poll will remain open. Please feel free to put your vote for one of these 5 actions. And if there's any other actions that you would like to take or learn more about, please do send that in the Q&A chat. So we have a question from I'm sorry if I don't get this name right, but Aoif Kirk. Do you not think that carbon credits defeat the purpose of carbon storage and sequestration? I would like to get Jan to answer this question.
Yeah, thank you a lot for this question. Carbon credits, of course, play a huge role in getting funding into the system. As I said, I see mostly 2 streams. One is are the carbon credits, which can bring in private funding, private finance in for peatland restoration, and also, for example, into carbon farming systems on peat soils, so that the huge investments which have to be done in the beginning, when you want to re-wet the land, set the water management infrastructure, establish the crops, get the machinery which is adapted to wet soils, and so on and so forth. And these carbon credits, this private funding, can make a change. But then for the long-term financing, for the long-term management of these lands, if it's not supposed to be wilderness, which we also need, but we also need managed peatlands in paludiculture, what we have seen also from Claudia's presentation, then we also need other income sources, like innovative value chains from paludiculture products and others. So I would say that carbon credits is one part of the game, but not the full picture.
Can I just jump in there just with 1 minute? I would say it defeats the purpose of it, but it is a tricky business. You have to remember that most of that 25 million pounds that we have raised has come from grants. We're now in a different world where we have blended finance. We have private sector money mixing with public sector money. If you wanted to generate officially certified carbon credits, that's part of the deal. Whether or not you like that, that's your own opinion, but it has to be done carefully and thoughtfully, and make sure that the companies we would work with would have to prove to us they are reducing their carbon internally first, not just, it's not a way of just offsetting, without any kind of constraints on it. So I do admit it is a tricky business, yes.
Thank you, Paul and Jan. We have a question from Shane, a question for Claudia. How do you most effectively de-risk the transition to paludiculture products, especially for farmers already making large incomes from dairy and beef?
Yeah, we have to work here in parallel. We have to address the demand side and also the supply side. And we have to do this in pilot project, in model character projects, and to prove that it's successful. We have to do, our plan is to test it also with companies of the Otto Group. Like, for example, they take paludiculture products and use it for furniture production or also for packaging materials. The Otto Group sends about more than 1 million packages per year, and we need a lot of packaging material, and that's what we plan to do, that we start this pilot project in furniture and paper substitutes or in packaging materials, and prove that it's successful, that we can use it. And then we would like to address other companies and inspire them to follow us. This is the thing which I meant with demand alliance. And parallel to this, we have to address also the farmers and give them the view and the perspective to transform their soil management to the paludis, because there will be a demand in the future, and this goes step by step. This will not be all at once, thousands of hectares. This will go step by step.
Thank you very much, Claudia. We have a question from Farouk Ullah from the B team. What advocacy activities can business get involved in to support the EU nature restoration law, and also the climate and biodiversity COP15 regarding peatlands?
I can take that briefly. Great question, and I alluded to some of the advocacy activities that Climate Catalyst are planning, a roundtable with MEPs and some dialogues with the member states. And indeed, we also have some activities going on at COP27 and the CBD COP. So we will circulate those details and invite you all to those events. We'll circulate those details with the follow-up from this webinar.
We have a question from Paul, to Paul. First of all, thank you for all the great insights in your projects. My question to Paul would be, how do you secure these large amounts of land that you are renaturing? Who owned it before and who owns it now? He also says, much respect for your work. It's truly a change you make.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yes, I didn't mention that. All of the land we work on is privately owned. So we have to work with landowners and we have to build the trust, which takes many years and development. And we essentially assess their land and we say, look, you've got this damage, that damage. And we spec up the work and we fund the work. We try to get them involved in a peatland code project if they want to. So these are all written into contracts and agreements. So it's all very, it's not like state-owned land in other countries. It's all privately owned and it's all protected by the contracts and agreements we have with landowners.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. Unfortunately, we are at time. We do have some very interesting questions that have come in during the webinar. We will make sure to send those out to you in a follow-up. I wanted to thank all of our presenters for a very interesting introduction to the work that you're doing and also to the actions and concrete pathways ahead for businesses to get involved in the action to restore peatlands. We will be sending out a survey for you to fill in the next few days, where you can also give us feedback on what activities, what topics you would like to learn about in the future. As Emily has mentioned, Climate Catalyst is organizing. This is the first event, which is going to kick off a series of other events and activities that we would like our network, businesses, civil society, governments, academia to be involved in to really take concrete actions in restoring peatlands. So I want to thank you very much for your time today, and we will be in touch.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a nice
Bye.
day.
Bye-bye.